Murdoch. For the next hour or so, we'll be discussing the topic of entrepreneurship and business. It's a discussion that we began on last week's program, which aired on Sunday, October 2nd. We had three guests last week. I think we had Mr. Walter O'Reilly joined us, Mr. Shanti Lindsay joined us, and also Mrs. Amaryl Adams Julian, all business people here in Antigua and Barbuda. We spoke to them about their experiences setting up and or inheriting and managing their different enterprises. And they gave us some valuable and very genuine insights into issues such as why they chose their particular industry, the hurdles they faced in terms of seeking business financing, the impact managing their own enterprises had on their personal lives, the best practices that one could turn to for keeping track of inflows and outflows, the impact family involvement can have on the success and longevity of a business, and the sort of mindset one ought to keep in order to cope with the demands and setbacks that will naturally occur. This week, we are continuing the discussion along those same lines, adding some additional perspectives to the panel. If you'd like to participate along with us this afternoon, you can WhatsApp comments or questions to 725-9111. That's 725-9111. Our panel this afternoon, we have with us Mr. Garfield Joseph. He is the director of the Prime Minister's Entrepreneurial Development Program, the EDP. He's a management professional and has managed at senior levels in multiple enterprises throughout his career. Happy to have him with us this afternoon. Mr. Garfield Joseph, how are you doing?
I'm on top of the world. Good afternoon. Good to be with you this afternoon, Mr. Murdoch.
We have joining us as well Mrs. Megan Samuel Fields. Megan Samuel Fields is a finance professional whose focus is on business management and financial management. She has been a certified public accountant for over 30 years and is a member of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as well as the Institute of Chartered Accountants in the Eastern Caribbean. She's also an attorney and has been for more than 12 years. Presently, she's the Chief Executive Officer of Samuel Fields Consulting Group. It comprises an energized team of professionals along with a rich talent pool of associate experts and other resources that meet any project specifications for its clients. As a communities e-learning partner, the consulting firm is also committed to democratizing financial literacy with a focus on financial empowerment and financial wellness for all. Megan and her sister, Doreed Whitlock, have co-founded and co-host Little Bite Ideas, which is a show live streamed weekly on Facebook and YouTube. The digital show looks at finance as a lifestyle journey and connects financial well-being to overall health. Good afternoon to you, Mrs. Megan Samuel Fields. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Kieran. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon to your listeners.
And finally, we have joining us as well Mr. Walter O'Reilly. Mr. Walter O'Reilly is the owner and manager of Spirits of the Caribbean, a retail liquor and tobacco duty-free shop that has been in operation for the past 12 years. He's also the owner of the Pierside Cafe in Redcliffe Quay and has a financial consulting business where he focuses on setting up point of sale and accounting systems, along with facilitating companies who are looking to outsource their payroll function. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Walter O'Reilly. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Kieran, and a happy good afternoon to all of your listeners.
No, I actually I'm having a second edition of this program. Well, I shouldn't say this program, but this topic, this discussion, because the discussion we had last week, I think there was quite a bit of positive feedback from it. In terms of persons who would have messaged me afterwards and said that was a sort of a refreshing approach to take, something a little more refreshing than the endless political discussions that I tend to host on this program. But anyway, and I think also Mr. Garfield Joseph, he reached out as well and said that if ever I should be interested in having him participate on this particular subject matter, business and entrepreneurship, that he'd be happy to do so. And so here we are, and I'm glad that we are back here today. And once again, folks, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to put in as the discussion goes on, you can WhatsApp them to 725-9111. Mr. Garfield Joseph, you would have, I think, heard the discussion last week. We would have had three persons on who were discussing the sort of challenges they faced in business, advice, best practices, and there was a lot of cohesion. I found there was a lot of they were empathizing. The panelists were empathizing with each other in terms of their experiences, what they put in, problems they'd run into, and how they had to overcome them. I wonder what your reflections are on some of the issues you heard last week.
All right, thank you very much for having me again, and thank you very much for this particular program, because I think it's extremely useful. I would just basically like to say that every country needs business, government, and society to work together for the benefits of its people. And that is why business and entrepreneurship are so important. And having these kinds of conversations, these kind of dialogues, can only help to elevate the discussion and to bring benefit to the people of Antigua and Barbuda today. I would say that in Antigua and Barbuda, that we have made in recent times tremendous progress in an effort to unleash the business potential of our people, especially the young people. We saw this coming into being during the COVID period when businesses were forced to lock down, persons had to be innovative. I also believe that the Prime Minister's Entrepreneurial Development Fund also served as a catalyst to provide financing. I still see that we have opportunities and we still have some ways to go. Let me close my comment by saying that I think, some of the challenges that we continue to face and business will continue to face. One is more access to funding. That is happening on several grounds, and I'd like to be able to speak about that in a few minutes. Ongoing education and training, I think, is critical, such as the program we're having here today. And then the third component is to how do we gather critical experiences? How do we upskill our people to give them the experience that they need, not only formal training, but practical experiences so that they can grow and develop their business. So with those opening comments, these are my early thoughts.
And generally, along the same lines, Mrs. Megan Samuel Fields, what has been your general experience if you were to, think on business in Antigua and Barbuda, entrepreneurship, the challenges that you've watched people face over the years? Just give me a sense of what you think of the environment for doing business in Antigua and Barbuda, whether or not it's tough, whether or not, there are opportunities that are underexploited. I mean, a few general comments to start us off.
Thanks, Kieran. But I will start off by saying I do believe right now in Antigua and Barbuda, especially just coming out of COVID, I think we are at a place where there's lots of opportunity. I know that we went through quite a difficult time during COVID. Lots of businesses struggled, and I dare say some are still struggling, and it was difficult. But lots of times it's as a result of our difficulties that we actually find the resilience and the willpower to actually overcome the difficulties. And what I saw during COVID, and well, I want to say after, I'm hoping that you're seeing the back of it. But what I saw was such a great outpouring of entrepreneurial ventures. Lots of young people, and not just young people, lots of people in general, but I do believe there were more young people than others, were able to, because of the difficulties they encountered, perhaps lost their jobs or for whatever reason had financial difficulties, they had to turn to doing something. And I believe that lots of people dug deep and found that they had what it took to start a business and to do things differently. So I believe where we are now is at a good point, but it's not enough. So we have persons who have recognized that, hey, I can be an entrepreneur, I can do a side hustle, I can make ends meet, find another way of doing things. But I really do believe that's step one, because step one is really to have the desire and the want, but there are other steps that need to come in, especially when it comes to finance and managing your business. So financial literacy is extremely important, and I do believe that everyone should focus on financial literacy. And we say we want to democratize financial literacy. It shouldn't be only for the accountants or only for the persons who did a degree in finance, but financial literacy should be something that everyone should embrace. And with financial literacy, we believe there should be financial well-being, because it's one thing to have the knowledge, but if you can't apply that knowledge to your business and to your life so that you have financial well-being, then it won't be worth it. So I feel where we are now, we are at a good point, but there's lots of work to be done. I heard Mr. Joseph speak about government and business, and I do believe there needs to be more of that, where government and business get together somehow and see how we can help others to get to where they need to be. And the business community on a whole, I do believe there are things that we can do. So one of the things we started doing was our Little Bite Ideas show, which really is a show that speaks about, at the heart of it is about finance, financial wellness, financial well-being, but it focuses on what we call the financial wheel, where there are so many different aspects of your life, whether it's spiritual, emotional, intellectual, physical, social, entrepreneurial, environmental. So there's so many areas that finance actually touch. And so what we do is we have conversations with different persons, and we always ask them to come with an idea. What little idea can you bring? Because what we have found as well is, and I heard someone last week on your show speak about having an idea and not wanting to share it. But I do believe it's time to share. We need to share our ideas, perhaps in a safe area, but lots of ideas, lots of business ventures get lost because they don't share the idea. So I believe the more we share and the more we collaborate with each other, we can make things happen.
And Mr. Walter O'Reilly, I think the topic of financial literacy is a good point for us to start off on. I think it's something Mr. Joseph and as well Mrs. Megan Samuel Fields have pointed to, but it's also something we sort of left off on last week, towards the end of our discussion last week. I think all of our panelists were pointing to the issue of financial literacy and how important that is in terms of being able to just be properly aware of what is going in and what is coming out in terms of your business, to know that you are actually doing something which is sustainable, as opposed to realizing after a while that you're in a quandary, and knowing how to access, we talk about access to finance. You got to have certain skills and a certain level of awareness in terms of how you keep your records and so on, if you want to be on top of things when it comes to making applications, providing certain records and documentation. But anyway, your thoughts, where we left off when we spoke about financial literacy, how make or break is that when it comes to business?
Well, financial literacy is key to managing any sort of business successfully. I think we also have to look at, talking about the coming out of the COVID experience that we've had. One of the things that we fail to do very well in Antigua is to engender the whole aspect of collaborative synergy among different people. One of the things that most entrepreneurs will tell you, that they themselves don't have all of the financing for a particular project. But if we can do things collaboratively, and this is now where financial literacy helps in this aspect of it, in terms of them understanding, if you can create proper structures, let's say a limited liability company, what are the rules and regulations that will then govern that particular entity. We can get a lot of persons who have different elements of ideas being able to come together collaboratively and being able to, instead of have to find the money all on your own, but maybe you can come together and then able to put those pieces together. But you can't do that without understanding the basic rules of how business works, how what you put in, and then if you're fortunate to make a profit, how much of that profit is distributed within the business to be retained, and then also in terms of just general remuneration to the persons who have inputted things, not only on a cash basis, but also on a kind basis. So those are the types of discussions that we really need to have. I think I wanted to focus on my discussion today on the more collaborative things that we seem to be very, very thing against doing. We've always been told, partnership is leadership. But if you ever look at a lot of the very successful companies we have in the world and even in the Caribbean. And we have a few successful companies here in Antigua that shows that persons who are able, that are like-minded, that are able to put the resources together, are able to come up with something very, very successful.
Interesting point, and I could bring it back over to Mr. Garfield Joseph. Mr. Garfield Joseph,
Mhm.
you wanted to talk about access to funding. There are three things that you pointed out: access to funding, ongoing education and training, and practical experience that persons can build upon. But in terms of access to funding, feel free to go into that. I found it rather insightful that Mr. Walter O'Reilly just spoke about the benefit of being able to collaborate, to build a partnership, to come together with different persons, and the greater access to finance that creates as one avenue to have access to business financing. But of course, we do have this often saying that that we are a bit mistrustful or a bit reluctant to engage in collaboration with persons. I don't know if that is a cultural thing. I don't know if it's something we say. I don't know. I don't know how true it is. I don't know, but. I don't know if it's perhaps inability to work together in organizations. We see that in some of our organizations sometimes. But on those issues, access to financing,
Yes.
partnership, what do you think?
Yes. So let me start with the partnership piece. I think historically and culturally, we're people who have not been cultured to work cooperatively. We see each other as a competition. And I think it's useful for us to recognize that as a small developing country, we're not able to leverage economies of scale like larger countries do. But I can tell you that there will be benefits if we're able to pool our resources. For example, you may be importing goods from Panama, Florida, Mexico, and rather than pay a freight forwarder for a particular number of items, why not come together because you're in the same industry? Maybe it's egg boxes that you use and you're buying at a very high price. Why could you not pool your resources as egg farmers to order a container that you can leverage the cost? So I do see that there are opportunities there. I also see that there are opportunities for investing, allowing others to invest in your business. I hear some funny stories that, people want to steal my ideas. An idea by itself is not able to leverage a successful business. You need capital, you need resources, you need know-how. And entrepreneurship is different to business management. A person can be entrepreneurial because he wants to invest, he sees an opportunity. It does not necessarily mean that he has the management skills to be able to manage the business successfully. Yes, some persons have those skills, right? But it's a very difficult challenge to be a good financial manager, an entrepreneur with vision and good people skills managing the logistics. And that is where cooperation comes in and ensuring that you can collaborate and hire the best talent. There are two things I want to say. Look, financing will always be a challenge because we know traditionally it's hard for persons who did not have collateral. They may have a good idea, a good business model, but they would not be able to get financing from the bank because banks have their methods of evaluating these loan applications, right? And so I'm delighted to state that one of the good things that will be happening shortly, the East Caribbean Securities Commission is actually basically testing a module that will allow persons to go for crowdfunding. So, for example, if you had a good business idea and you were finding it challenging to raise capital either from friends, family, from the commercial banks, then you have another avenue. I think that's a good opportunity. But that allows you to also open up your business to others because by investing into your business, they become shareholders. And I think that's what we need to think about. And also, just for persons to know, in addition to the Entrepreneurial Development Program, there are also a number of banks. So the East Caribbean Central Bank has made available to persons in Antigua and Barbuda what is called a loan guarantee scheme that basically, in essence, allows banks to take a little bit more chance in giving the loan once there's a sound business model if the collateral is not in place, and the East Caribbean Central Bank will underwrite the potential loss for that particular project. So I think that these are good things that are happening in terms of entrepreneurship and business development in Antigua, and I think we just need to continue to try to work together. Final point I'll make and give my colleagues a chance to participate is that I also believe the financial literacy piece is critical, right? Because at the end of the day, Every business involves some amount of risk. It doesn't matter how great the idea, there are challenges and circumstances beyond the control of the business owner, the entrepreneur. But if you don't understand the fundamentals of financing, then you're going to be in a serious situation. What I've discovered, believe it or not, and this is why I stated at the onset that I think we're in a good place. You'll be surprised at the number of institutions, not just businesses and private business owners, not just up-and-coming entrepreneurs, but business people in the private sector and the public sector. They're basically saying that the employees, they have personal financial challenges. They need to know how to manage their personal finance financial situations. They need to know how to be able to create a budget, how to generate additional income. So I think that conversation needs to continue. And I think over time, we're going to see the fruits and the benefits of these kinds of programs, these kinds of intervention. And I think we're in a good trajectory going forward. And we need to make sure that we continue to collaborate. I also feel, final point, that there's a real opportunity in Antigua for the business, private sector community to communicate and collaborate even more with government institutions. And I also see the opportunity for even government institutions to leverage the resources within their own respective ministries and departments so that the general public can benefit in a whole. A rising tide will lift all boats, right? So if we have educational opportunities to learn more about business, like at the University of the West Indies, we should take hold of those opportunities. And I also believe that businesses have a corporate social responsibility to support those kinds of initiatives. Persons who are working in the accounting department, they may have experience, but they may not have the formal education, codified learning. University of the West Indies is where they need to invest in their employees as well so that they can grow and bring those benefits to the people of Antigua and Barbuda and the country as a whole. So I see this as a collaborative effort, not only at the level of the entrepreneur and the business, but collaboration in relation to the public, the government, and the private sector. And like I said, a rising tide will lift all boats. Antigua and Barbuda will be the beneficiaries as a result of these types of intervention.
I see a comment here on the board that says, good afternoon, good discussion. It is easy to say pool ideas and get together and collaborate, order stuff to cut costs, but sometimes it's much easier said than done. The frustration that comes with the efforts to secure pooling in order to minimize costs is extremely great at times, and at times detrimental to one's mental state of well-being. Interesting a sentiment there. I'll take it over to Mrs. Megan Samuel Fields to ask you about the issue of partnership and what sort of benefits and even detriments that can have in terms of being an entrepreneur, managing a business, access to finance, that sort of thing.
Look, I get it. We in Antigua, and I would dare say in the Caribbean, we have heard the phrase partnership is leadership, and it's really interesting if you stop and think back on all the things that you've heard your parents and your grandparents say that you just take for granted. So a lot of times the things that we just accept as fact, we probably need to go back and investigate them. And I think that's one, because here's the thing with a partnership. And when I say a partnership, I'm not just talking about Kieran and Megan coming together and we say, okay, gonna go into partnership. I'm talking about having discussions, having contracts, things properly drawn up, so it's absolutely clear what each one is bringing to the table and what's expected of them. And I think that is part of the problem when we say we don't want to go into partnership. We don't take the time to properly plan out beforehand. So planning, financial planning, in a business, setting your goals, setting the objectives, and really hammering out what is it each person wants to get out of this partnership. These are the kinds of things that they're necessary. And having the communication up front so that there is, I was going to say no misunderstanding, but realistically, let's say not that much of a misunderstanding as you move forward. And so if we take the time beforehand, proper planning, proper organizing, having your goals, having your targets, understanding strengths and weaknesses of each of the partners, and having everything upfront, properly documented, properly in a contract, I do believe we could see benefits from a partnership. But what we're doing is we're holding on to what Granny said and what Mommy said. And a lot of times, and I'm just using this one example about partnership is leaky ship. But a lot of times, if we just examine the things that we grew up with, and we held on to as gospel, but if we just take the time to kind of unravel that, we'll see that it's not necessarily so. I also want to just speak about the comment you just read and about the mental stress and how it affects their well-being. And I fully understand where that person is coming from. A lot of times, again, we want to go into some type of financial activity without thinking about how it affects all aspects of our lives. Because as I said before, it's not enough just to be financially literate. You want to be able to understand finance, understand the financial skills, and then use what you've learned to make important financial decisions. So it's very important that we look at ourselves in our entirety, because we're not just financial beings. We have a spiritual side. Same way we have an entrepreneurial side. We focus on the environment. We have to look at our physical bodies, so many other things. And we are also creative. So we have to look at the different aspects of our lives and see how we can be financially well. Now, I know we're speaking about entrepreneurs, and most times when we're speaking about an entrepreneur, we're talking about this single person who has an idea and runs and does a business. But I want to point out that there are lots of entrepreneurs who are actually working in corporations. These are what the term now is like intrapreneurs. So instead of being entre as in outside, you're within a corporation, but you have the same skills, you have the same mindset as an entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur who's working within a corporation, these persons can bring a lot of benefits to the organization. So whether you're on your own as an entrepreneur or in a corporation, it's things like your critical thinking, how creative and innovative you are, how quick are you to recognize opportunities, your future orientation, how comfortable you are with risk. So these are all the things that, whether you're in or outside of a corporation, these are the things that you need to focus on. Mr. Joseph, I just want to say one other quick thing. Mr. Joseph also mentioned corporations being more aware and being engaged with their employees, and understanding that some of their employees just might not have the financial literacy understanding. And I do believe that these companies, it will be worth their while spending some time focusing on their employees, ensuring that they get the necessary exposure and understanding to financial literacy and financial well-being. And if they focus on that, they should see the benefits at the end of the day.
Mr. Walter O'Reilly, a question on the board here. It says, hello everyone, I'd like to put a question to the panel. Why is it so difficult for Antiguans returning home to open a business? Between the banks that ask nonsensical questions, intellectual property, I think that's the Intellectual Property Office, and the government, it is very difficult. The banks want everything except your death certificate, even if you have half of what you want to borrow. It is much easier to open a business in North America. Mr. Walter O'Reilly, what do you think? The difficulties of getting started, interacting with various regulatory things that require you to register, get this approval, and so on and so forth, red tape.
Actually, from my experience with intellectual properties, that's actually quite straightforward. It's not again, I'm just only speaking about my personal experiences. I find that is a straightforward exercise in terms of being able to register your business, whether it is a trading as if you're going to go and get yourself a limited liability company, it's probably best served finding yourself a decent lawyer who can, help you navigate through those little waters. Now, with that said, again, once you've done that, they will always prompt you and say, well, there are two other steps that you need to go and do. One is go to Inland Revenue, which, to register your business, and then go to the various statutory bodies to register your business. Again, those are straightforward things. I mean, some of the requirements at the different individual statutory bodies, you know, it's like, come on, we could probably cut out a few things. However, they have their reasons for it, and so be it. But those are to me not challenging per se. The challenging part of it is the financial institutions who are extremely risk adverse. Basically, you have to have a business up and running before the banks are going to even think about getting involved with you. So it doesn't matter how good your business plan is or whatever else. They want to see that you have some skin in the game. If you can cash secure the loan, then your issues with the banks may be reduced. But outside of that, the financial institutions are extremely challenging to I want to use the word win over. And like I said, you can have the best business plan put together. They want to see that you have had this enterprise up and running before they get involved. That has been my personal experience, and I'm sure that a number of other persons would probably share the same things. So yes, they there's the mechanics of dealing with the banks. One of the things that I think grates on a lot of our nerves is that if you're going to come in, give me the laundry list of all of the things that you need to have presented to the bank. Let me go about getting them, before I come back to you. But a lot of times, they say, all right, we need you to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then, you present those things. And then you have the rest of the alphabet that say, oh, yeah, by the way, we need, like I said, the other part of the alphabet to take care of. And those are the things that create that level of frustration with persons, because here it is that initially you're being told these are the requirements, and then you're being asked for other things, along the way. But the other part that is the most troublesome part of it is the length of time it takes for a lot of these commercial institutions to turn around loan applications. You could go from anything, and I'm talking about, again, from shortest, my personal experience, anything between 4 months and over a year to be able to get that application approved. And we have that saying, time is money, and a lot of times, a lot of your ideas or your business plans that you have are time sensitive. And if you had to wait solely on the bank's responses to you, they probably kill your business before you even get started. So those are some of the challenges on a very realistic point of view that a lot of us have to deal with. And I keep stressing, and I wonder, why the banks do this. If you are in the business of loaning money, which is the majority of where you get most of your money, why you don't have it properly resourced?
And yeah, can I jump in here, please, Mr. Moderator?
Well, I mean, I'll come in right back to you, Walter. You don't mind?
No, he can go right ahead.
Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I fully understand and appreciate the perspective shared by Mr. O'Reilly, right? And my point of view is that we just need to be customer-centric, and we just need to listen and respond to the voice of the customer. For example, at EDP, when we had the application form, when the application form was rolled out, we got feedback from the customer that some of the questions were onerous. And unless it was mission critical to have those questions there, we actually removed those questions. I'm saying that to say that financial institutions need to be responsive, right? It's not of the laws of the median person application process. Now, it is true that some things are there for fiduciary responsibility, proper documentation. But we have to make it easier, faster, and better for the customer. I've had my recent experience at the bank, and it was amazing to me. The process, it's an arduous process, simply because, there's no checklist, for example, of the things that you need. You're not able to complete that application online. Or you have to remember that I lived in the U.S. for some time. I'm able to call on the phone and could get a loan pre-approved over the phone by having a conversation, and then I bring in my documentation. I'm not saying that we're there yet, but we need to take that approach, right? So a simple checklist of what is required online, posted online, so that the customer is able to see what the requirement is before they get there, and even to complete the application online, I think would be very, very useful, very practical. The other opportunity that I see, I think every customer who is denied for whatever reason deserves an explanation, written explanation, indicating the reason why the loan was approved, was not approved, and to invite them to reapply if their circumstances should change. That's a commitment that we have. I also like to say, just for the benefit of the general public, I mean, financial institutions, the only way they make money is to take other people's money, their savings and deposits, they lend it out at an interest rate, and so they have a huge responsibility to make sure that they're lending these monies responsibly. If they're not able to get it back, they can't give back depositors their money. So they generally follow 5 C's of lending. What is the capital required? How much do you need to borrow? How much does the business really need? Sometimes persons are seeking to borrow capital. Business may only need material and equipment that costs $120,000. They say, give me $200,000 because I want to keep $80,000 in my pocket. It's not going to work. So the capital required in relation to the business needs is critical. Whether or not you have collateral, I mean, it doesn't matter. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. Someone is going to stone me. You may have the best business plan, but there are circumstances outside of your control. COVID was a circumstance outside of our control. The war in Ukraine is a circumstance outside of our control. What we're seeing, scarcity of goods and inflation. So even though you have a really great business plan, I'm not picking up for the banks, I'm just defining reality, there's a certain amount of inherent risk, right? And yes, I agree that the banks in the past, culturally, are very risk averse, but you have to understand why they had this posture and position. The thing that I spoke about most recently is the loan guarantee allows the bank to lend easier, taking a little bit more risk, doing their due diligence. And so I am hoping, and I believe strongly, we have at least 3 financial institutions. I don't speak for these banks, but I know that they are part of the program, Antigua Commercial Bank, ECAB, and CUB, with whom we have a strategic relationship. So I think initiatives like those, loan guarantee, will give greater access. There's also the issue of character, and again, I like to be very transparent with persons when they come to apply, right? Character is your credit history. Do you have a history of repaying? If you have borrowed money from different financial institutions, especially for business, and you have not repaid, it sends 2 signals to the lending institution. One, you don't have a successful track record. So if you have borrowed, you have not repaid, you don't have a record of repaying when you borrow, then you're going to be, it's very difficult for you to get a loan. You have to talk about the conditions facing the business, right? So oftentimes persons will come in and they say, you know what, let me give you a scenario. Let me not talk about persons. Suppose you are a hotel operator and you are saying to an investor in Florida, I need to borrow $60 million because I want to build a hotel in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Where we know there is a lot of civil strife, civil disobedience, a lot of people are fleeing the country, economic turmoil. You ask the question, what are the conditions facing the business that you're proposing? And if the conditions are not favorable, then you know it's going to be risky. I'm not suggesting that it cannot be issued or approved, but you take that into consideration. Mm-hmm. And very critically is the capacity of the business to repay. And the capacity is what we spoke about, what Ms. Fields spoke about, knowing the financials, right? Because you could have a brilliant business idea and the financials don't work, then it will not work. Let me end my comments by saying this. One person spoke to me about bringing a particular business to Antigua, and I spoke to the person, and I said, she asked whether or not I thought it was a good business idea. I said, yes, good business idea, place for young people to go, and they need to do this kind of activity and that kind of stuff. And I said, but can it work financially? What do you mean? How much will it cost to build out the infrastructure? $1.2 million. How many young people you think will come on a nightly basis, and what would they spend on average? And when you do the math, in terms of the capital costs, the ongoing operation costs, the staffing costs, electricity costs, while your idea might sound to be or seem like a good idea, the financials do not support. So in closing, just to, again, bring the public up to speed as to the methodology, the process that banks normally use. We call it the 5 C's of lending: capital required, the collateral to cover the risk, the character, the credit history, one and the same thing, conditions facing the business, and the capacity to repay. So hopefully that benefits someone who may have had a challenge in the past. But I do believe every financial institution should give an explanation to that person why they were not approved, because the more they know, they can improve their circumstances.
Let me just read one or two of these comments that are here. I see one here that says Antigua remains way down on the list of the ease of doing business. Someone should lead a delegation to the government to take the bureaucracy out of setting up a business, getting a bank account, and fair trade without government competition. There's another comment that came in that said, if you're starting up a new business, you shouldn't even be going to a bank. You should be with a venture capital fund. Our economy lacks appropriate financial instruments. Banks are very risk averse. They have a comfortable market in houses and cars, virtually risk-free. It's a cartel. Miss Megan Samuel Fields, or Mrs. Megan Samuel Fields, rather. Any comments you'd want to interject at this point? I mean, we've been sort of leaning quite heavily on the financial aspect of things, and I think that's an important issue. I wonder if there's anything you'd want to contribute, any comment you'd want to react to at this point?
So, in especially regarding what was just said by Mr. Joseph, and I quite appreciate what he said about the 5 C's. This is one of the things I want to tell our audience. We have to keep it real. I try as much as possible to be as realistic as possible. And I'll be the first to say, I am not pleased with the banks sometimes. But I don't work at the bank, and I know they have their requirements. So what are we going to do? Are you going to sit around and complain about the banks? Or are you going to see what you can do to make things better, or to make a change? And I do believe that lots of times the banks, they would have their reasons for doing whatever they're doing. Now, if the banks decide they're risk averse, then they have their reasons for being risk averse. What I think we need to do is understand what the banks require and see how we can get these solutions. It might be, I go back to the whole partnership situation. It might be that the bank is not going to consider you alone, but if you team up with someone else and have a solid business plan, it might work. It might call for you to go to a financial advisor or get a financial mentor, a financial coach, to get you where you need to be in terms of understanding your financial literacy, understanding financial statements, understanding the risks involved in the business that the business you want to start. So I think a lot of times we point the fingers at the banks. And as I said, I'm one of the finger pointers at times too, because it can get very frustrating. But I do believe there's a lot that we can do. We can see how best we can educate ourselves, understand what the requirements are, those 5 C's that Mr. Joseph spoke about, very critical, and do the homework that we need to do. I know it is so exciting as an entrepreneur. You have this great idea and you know that it's going to make money and it's your baby. So you get all wrapped up in the emotion of the actual idea without sitting down and giving it a hard look. And have your financial advisor, someone who understands business, understands the different financial ratios, and make sure you learn about financial literacy. It's some things can be difficult, but once you find a good partner you can work with to show you the different areas that you need to focus on. I think that's where a lot of us, we need to focus on and kind of unravel or unwrap ourselves from our idea that we are holding on to so tightly and closely, because we just know that this is going to do well, and we need to give it a hard look. It might not be the answers that we want to hear sometimes, but it might be best if we have that heart to heart talk with someone who can assist, and you have a better understanding of why you need to provide financial statements to the bank, why you need to ensure you have enough working capital, why you need to ensure that you have an emergency plan in place in the event that you don't get the customers that you figured you would get in the first 6 months, things like that. So in as much as, yes, the banks can do more, I believe as individuals, entrepreneurs, there's more we can do. And I always, when I speak, I don't want to just speak about the individuals. I also want to speak about the corporations as well, because there's a lot corporations can do for their employees. You have employees who come to work every day, doing everything for the organization. Has the employer just looked in to see how is this employee doing financially? Yes, they're paying them at the end of the month, but do they know how to manage their money? Are they being able to properly meet their month-end needs? Have they engaged in a financial wellness program for their employees? We have found within my company at SFCG, we do a bit of that, and we have what we call like a financial checkup, where we encourage individuals, if you are a sole proprietor or even a partner, as well as corporations, to do a financial checkup with your employees, because lots of times they just might need, and it's not necessarily money all the time. They might just need to have maybe a course, somebody giving them a little session on budgeting, on investing, on savings, or even on getting a loan. So I think there's a lot, we as individuals and employers, there's a lot we can do to help the employees or the entrepreneurs themselves to be able to approach the banks if needed, or if not needed, to really start their business. So I think we need to look a little bit beyond just the banks and seeing what we can do to get ourselves ready.
Coming back to you, Mr. Walter O'Reilly, and you can respond to anything you want to offer a comment on. I'd ask, what are some of the other challenges, as we, I think we have just around 10 minutes left for this program. What are some of the other challenges that you think businesses in Antigua and Barbuda face? Small business persons who are running a small enterprise, maybe themselves, maybe just themselves and one or two employees, or maybe themselves and a partner or two, and it's something they've started, it's a small enterprise. What are some of the challenges you think are being faced?
Well, one of the things that and I'm going to tie those questions here to something I've been thinking about with the financial institutions. I think one of the requirements that banks should impose upon, especially budding, very, very, green entrepreneurs and whatnot, they should mandate that, let's say you had a business idea that required $100,000. The bank should say, well, listen, you're gonna have to take $120,000, and this additional $20,000 is going to pay for support in terms of someone like Miss Megan Samuel Fields or Garfield, in terms of someone who was able to help them with their bookkeeping, some practical things with some legal advice. And the other part that a lot of times we leave as a second or third thought is marketing. How do we brand and market our products or services? So if you were able to say, well, listen, we have a group of persons, and you're free to go and choose any among those persons that we have as attached to the bank. and the bank pays them for the first year, gets you up and running, it will help to mitigate a lot of the problems very early for those young entrepreneurs or people just getting into business. And I mean, it doesn't even mean just only young persons, but entrepreneurs, nevertheless, that have that sort of support system will enable them to be a lot more successful. So if you tie those things in, I believe that it could be a little bit more. The bank's risk should get reduced at that point in time, and the entrepreneurs should be a lot more successful.
Well, God, can I jump in here?
Yes, briefly.
Walter, that is what we call in our show a little idea. That I think is such an excellent idea. Banks, if you're listening, I think it's a great idea because what Walter is really saying is if the banks implement something like that, one of the risks that banks have is whenever they give a loan to someone, especially someone they've never done business with, there's a risk that this person might not be able to repay. But if they have something built into perhaps all first time borrowers where they